Something is missing in this trailer, and it's not subtle. It's not hidden in the background. It's not something you can ignore. Monica is gone, and the silence around her disappearance is louder than any gunshot Yellowstone has ever fired. The Why? Marshals Episode 1 trailer doesn't just introduce a new chapter. It quietly confirms that Casey Dutton's life has been shattered again. But this time there is no ranch to return to, no family table to sit at, and no peace waiting at the end of the road. What we see instead is a man stepping back into violence, not because he wants to, but because something unforgivable has already happened. The question isn't whether Monica is gone. The real question is, what did it cost Casey to survive it? And more importantly, what kind of man does tragedy turn him into now? From the very first moments of The Why? Marshals Episode 1 trailer, one thing becomes painfully clear. Casey Dutton is no longer searching for balance. That battle is already over, and he lost. The calm, conflicted man who once tried to choose family over bloodshed is gone. In his place stands someone quieter, heavier, and far more dangerous. The trailer doesn't need to show us Monica's fate directly. It shows us the result. Casey's eyes no longer scan the horizon with doubt. They look forward with purpose, shaped by loss and hardened by something he cannot undo. Monica was the emotional center of Casey's world. She was the reason he kept walking away from the violence that followed him since his military days. Every time Casey tried to leave killing behind, Monica was the voice reminding him that a different life was possible. A life where Tate could grow up without inheriting trauma. A life where love mattered more than survival. That is why her absence hits so hard. Without Monica, the life Casey fought to protect simply stops existing. The trailer suggests that between Yellowstone and Marshals, something irreversible happened. Monica didn't leave. She didn't drift away. The silence surrounding her points to something final. Something violent. And that possibility changes how we understand Casey's decision to join the U.S. Marshals. This isn't a career move. It's a reaction. When peace is taken from a man like Casey, violence becomes familiar again. Not because he enjoys it, but because it's the only place where pain makes sense. What makes this even more heartbreaking is Tate. Casey isn't just grieving as a husband. He's fighting to hold on to his son while standing on emotional quicksand. The trailer hints that Casey sees himself in Tate more than ever now. The anger, the confusion, the damage caused by growing up surrounded by death. Monica was the shield that protected Tate from becoming a reflection of his father's past. Without her, Casey realizes that Tate is standing exactly where he once stood, at the edge of a life defined by trauma. This realization explains why Casey becomes more focused on being a protector than ever before. But protection in Marshals doesn't look gentle. It looks brutal. Wearing a badge doesn't cleanse his hands, it just gives him structure. The Marshals offer rules, targets, and direction. Things grief doesn't allow. Every mission, every pursuit, every threat gives Casey something to push against instead of collapsing inward. The trailer also makes it clear that this version of Casey is not seeking redemption. He's seeking control. Control over chaos. Control over fear. Control over the idea that he failed Monica when it mattered most. That guilt doesn't disappear, it fuels him. And the more dangerous the work becomes, the more comfortable Casey seems within it. This is why Marshals feels fundamentally different from Yellowstone. There is no land to defend. No family empire to protect. This story begins after the damage is done. Episode 1 isn't asking whether Casey can survive this life. It's asking whether anyone around him will survive the man grief is turning him into. And if Monica truly died because of violence, then every criminal Casey hunts now feels less like a job, and more like a continuation of a war he never got to finish. The Why? Marshals trailer never confirms Monica's fate with words, but it confirms it with consequences. Everything about Casey's behavior points to a loss that wasn't natural, wasn't peaceful, and wasn't something he could accept. This is not the posture of a man who lost someone to time. This is the posture of someone who lost someone to violence. And that distinction matters because it explains why Casey doesn't grieve quietly, he mobilizes. If Monica was taken from him, then the world didn't just fail Casey. It betrayed him. Monica represented the possibility of a future untouched by bloodshed. She believed Casey could be more than his instincts, more than his training, more than his past. Her presence softened him, slowed him down, and reminded him that survival wasn't the same thing as living. So if she is truly gone, then the trailer suggests that the last reason Casey had to avoid violence died with her. What makes this loss even more devastating is that Monica wasn't just Casey's emotional support. She was Tate's moral compass. Tate grew up surrounded by chaos, danger, and fear. He witnessed things no child should ever see. Monica was the one who translated that chaos into understanding. She gave Tate a sense of identity that wasn't rooted in trauma. Without her, Tate doesn't just lose his mother, he loses his anchor to stability. The trailer subtly hints that Casey is aware of this danger. He sees Tate drifting toward the same emotional patterns that once consumed him. Silence. Withdrawal. Anger buried under obedience. Casey knows exactly where that path leads because he walked it himself. And that knowledge terrifies him more than any armed suspect ever could. This fear doesn't push Casey away from his son. It pushes him toward obsession. Obsession with protection. Obsession with control. This is where the Marshals come in. Joining the U.S. Marshals isn't just about law enforcement. It's about structure. After Monica's absence shattered his inner world, Casey needs rules to hold himself together. Clear lines between good and bad. Orders instead of choices. Missions instead of memories. The Marshals give him a reason to wake up every day without asking questions grief refuses to answer. But the trailer makes it clear. This job comes with a price. The more Casey leans into his role as a marshal, the more he distances himself emotionally. He becomes sharper, colder, more efficient. This isn't growth. It's armor. Every confrontation, every chase, every act of violence becomes another layer protecting him from feeling what Monica's absence truly means. There's also a deeper implication hiding beneath the surface. If Monica was killed, then Casey's decision to become a marshal may not be entirely lawful in spirit. Justice and revenge often wear the same face in stories like this. The trailer hints that Casey may be walking that dangerous line, using the badge to hunt criminals while privately searching for something much more personal. Closure. Answers. Or punishment. What makes this even more unsettling is how natural Casey looks in this world. Violence doesn't disturb him. It focuses him. That's what makes Marshals so tense. We're not watching a man slowly descend. We're watching someone return to who he always was before love interrupted him. Monica didn't change Casey permanently. She paused him. And now that pause is over. Section 2 makes one thing painfully clear. Monica's absence isn't just backstory. It's the emotional engine of the entire series. Every decision Casey makes, every risk he takes, and every boundary he crosses traces back to one unresolved truth. Whatever happened to Monica didn't just break his heart, it rewired his sense of right and wrong. And as episode 1 unfolds, the real danger may not be the criminals Casey hunts, but what happens when grief finally catches up to him. INY. Marshals, fatherhood is no longer a background element in Casey Dutton's life. It becomes the emotional battlefield where every choice he makes is tested. The trailer makes it clear that after Monica's disappearance, Tate is not simply grieving, he is changing. And Casey notices it immediately. The quiet looks. The emotional distance. The way Tate watches the world instead of interacting with it. These are not normal reactions of a child healing. These are warning signs Casey knows too well, because they mirror his own childhood scars. Monica was the emotional shield between Tate and the harsh reality of the Dutton world. She softened the edges, explained the unexplainable, and reminded Tate that violence was not the answer to pain. Without her, that protection disappears overnight. Tate is left with a father who loves him deeply but struggles to express that love without fear, authority, and control. The trailer suggests that Casey is aware of this imbalance, yet he feels powerless to fix it. This is where Casey's internal conflict becomes unbearable. He knows that Tate needs emotional presence, not just physical protection. But Casey doesn't know how to be gentle without Monica. His instincts push him toward discipline, distance, and strength because those are the tools that once kept him alive. He fears that softness will make Tate vulnerable, even though deep down he knows that emotional isolation is far more dangerous. The time gap between Yellowstone and Marshals clearly forced Casey to confront this reality. Spencer Hudnut's words suggest that Casey became more focused on being a father than ever before. But this focus doesn't come from peace, it comes from fear. Fear that Tate will grow up angry. Fear that Tate will internalize loss instead of processing it. Fear that his son will one day stand where Casey stands now, carrying guilt he never chose. Thomas Rainwater's presence becomes critical at this point in the story. After John Dutton's death, Thomas slowly steps into a role that fills a dangerous emotional void in Casey's life. He is not just an ally or a political figure. He becomes a moral compass. Someone who reminds Casey that protection does not require brutality. That strength can exist without cruelty. When Thomas tells Casey, "You are not a killer, you are a protector," it lands with weight because Casey is no longer sure where that line exists. For Tate, Thomas represents stability. A calm authority figure who offers guidance without fear and discipline without violence. In many ways, Thomas becomes the emotional buffer Monica once was. And that is both comforting and tragic. Comforting because Tate is not alone. Tragic because it confirms that Casey cannot fill every role Monica left behind, no matter how hard he tries. The trailer hints that Casey's work as a marshal constantly pulls him away from this fragile balance. Every mission increases the emotional distance between him and his son. Casey believes he is protecting Tate by fighting monsters outside their home, but he may be creating one inside himself. The more violence he accepts as necessary, the harder it becomes to switch back into a nurturing father. This section of the story raises the most painful question of all. Can a man shaped by trauma raise a child without passing that trauma forward? Casey wants to break the cycle. He wants Tate to grow up free of rage, fear, and guilt. But the world of Marshals doesn't reward emotional vulnerability. It rewards efficiency, aggression, and control. Episode 1 sets fatherhood as Casey's greatest challenge. Not because he doesn't love Tate, but because love alone may not be enough. As the series moves forward, the tension will not come from whether Casey can protect his son physically, but whether he can protect Tate's humanity while slowly losing his own. When Casey Dutton joins the U.S. Marshals, it doesn't feel like a promotion or a fresh start. It feels like a man stepping into a controlled battlefield. The trailer presents the Marshals not as heroes, but as individuals carrying their own damage, secrets, and moral compromises. This is not a team built on trust. It's a unit built on necessity. And for Casey, that makes it dangerously familiar. At the center of this team is Pete Calvin, Casey's former SEAL team leader. This detail is critical. Pete is not just a colleague. He is a reminder of who Casey used to be before family forced him to change. Their shared military history means they don't need explanations. They understand violence the same way. They speak the same silent language of survival. And that connection makes Pete both Casey's greatest ally and his greatest threat. Pete knows how to use Casey's strengths, but he also knows how to push him past emotional limits. The trailer hints that Pete doesn't see Casey as a broken man. He sees him as a weapon that was never fully put away. Under Pete's leadership, the Marshals operate with precision, aggression, and emotional detachment. There is little room for hesitation. And for Casey, that structure is comforting. Orders are easier than choices. Targets are easier than memories. The danger is that this environment doesn't encourage healing. It encourages suppression. Andrea's presence adds a different kind of tension. She isn't shaped by military discipline, but by moral conflict. Exiled from her previous position for speaking out, Andrea represents truth in a system that often survives on silence. The trailer suggests she doesn't fit neatly into the Marshals' culture, and that makes her unpredictable. For Casey, Andrea is unsettling because she reflects the voice Monica once had, the voice that questioned authority and challenged violent solutions. Then there is Belle, the former ATF agent who thrives undercover. She operates in shadows, deception, and emotional control. Belle understands how to become someone else to survive. And that ability creates a subtle but dangerous parallel with Casey. Both are experts at compartmentalizing pain. The trailer hints at a possible emotional connection between them, but it's not framed as romance, it's framed as recognition. Two people who understand what it means to lose pieces of yourself for the job. Miles completes the team with quiet depth. A former police officer from the Broken Rock Reservation, Miles carries guilt in a different form. He left his old life because enforcing the law against his own people became unbearable. His decision to become a marshal wasn't about power, it was about protection. And that moral clarity stands in contrast to Casey's emotional confusion. Miles knows why he's there. Casey is still figuring that out. Together, this team doesn't feel like a family. It feels like a temporary alliance forged under pressure. The trailer suggests that loyalty will be tested early, and trust will not come easily. Every member carries secrets, and every secret is a potential fracture point. For Casey, this environment mirrors his internal state, organized on the surface, unstable underneath. What makes Section 4 so compelling is the idea that the Marshals may not save Casey from himself. They may sharpen him instead. Surrounded by people who normalize violence and emotional distance, Casey risks losing the last parts of himself that Monica once protected. The badge gives him authority, but it also gives him permission to act, to pursue, and possibly to cross lines he once respected. Episode 1 positions the Marshals not as a solution, but as an escalation. A place where Casey's skills are valued, his trauma is ignored, and his grief is transformed into efficiency. And in a world like that, the greatest danger isn't the criminals they chase. It's how easy it becomes to justify anything in the name of duty. By the end of the Why Marshals Episode 1 trailer, it becomes clear that this series is not asking viewers to celebrate a new beginning. It is asking them to witness the consequences of unfinished grief. Everything about the tone, pacing, and character focus suggests that Episode 1 will not answer questions. It will raise dangerous ones. And the biggest of them all remains unanswered. What really happened to Monica? The trailer's refusal to show her, mention her directly, or confirm her fate is intentional. This silence turns Monica into more than a character. She becomes the emotional ghost haunting every decision Casey makes. Whether she was murdered, caught in crossfire, or lost because of a life Casey couldn't escape, her absence defines the story. Episode 1 doesn't treat this as mystery for shock value. It treats it as a wound that never closed. Casey's return to violence is not portrayed as heroic. It's portrayed as inevitable. The series seems to suggest that when a man like Casey loses the person who gave meaning to restraint, the world pushes him back toward what he does best. Killing isn't presented as weakness. It's presented as muscle memory. And the Marshals give Casey an arena where that muscle memory is rewarded. But Episode 1 also plants subtle warnings. Thomas Rainwater's words, Tate's emotional distance, and Casey's growing detachment all hint that this path comes with a cost. The badge does not erase guilt. It organizes it. And that organization can become dangerous when grief starts to feel justified. The trailer hints that Casey may not just be enforcing the law. He may be searching for something specific. Someone responsible. Someone who represents the moment his life broke. This is where Episode 1 becomes psychologically tense. The audience isn't asked to question whether Casey will cross a line. They're asked to wonder how far past it he's already gone. His calm demeanor, controlled reactions, and emotional restraint suggest someone who has already accepted darkness as part of himself. That acceptance is more frightening than rage. The Marshals team adds to this unease. They are not there to save Casey emotionally. They are there to function, to complete missions, to survive. In that environment, emotional breakdowns are weaknesses. And Casey has learned how to bury pain deep enough that it never interrupts performance. Episode 1 seems ready to show how dangerous that skill can be. At the same time, the trailer leaves room for one fragile hope, Tate. Everything Casey does ultimately circles back to his son. Protecting Tate isn't just motivation. It's justification. Casey tells himself that every sacrifice, every risk, every violent act is for Tate's future. But Episode 1 quietly challenges that belief. Because a child doesn't just inherit safety. He inherits behavior. And if Tate grows up watching his father solve pain with force, then Monica's absence may echo far beyond one life. What makes Why Marshals feel different from Yellowstone is this emotional honesty. There is no promise of land, legacy, or power. Only survival. Only damage control. Only people trying to live with choices they can't undo. Removing the why from the title feels symbolic. This is not about the Dutton Empire. This is about what remains when the empire collapses. Episode 1 promises a series grounded in consequences rather than spectacle. Violence isn't exciting here, it's heavy. Every action carries emotional weight. Every silence says more than dialogue. And every unanswered question about Monica sharpens the tension. As the trailer ends, one thing becomes clear. Why Marshals is not asking who Casey Dutton is. It's asking what happens when the man who tried to escape violence finally stops running. And if Episode 1 is any indication, the answer won't be comforting, but it will be unforgettable.